I just cleared a Pit of the Artificer level 100 with this Fractured Winterglass Frozen Ore build in Diablo 4 Season 4, and I'm going to share with you guys all of my gear, my skills, my Paragon, the enchantment system, and the decisions behind what we're doing and why we're doing it, so you too can reproduce this result to great success. The gear that I used to get the job done here is as follows. I had a Harlequin Crest. I was lucky to hit this early in the season. This is Masterworked 8 out of 12. It's 925, obviously. All stats, max life, resource generation, and cooldown. Resource and cooldown were what I've actually masterworked so far. I would recommend that you try to aim for as much cooldown as you can get, and I probably should re-roll this, but the fact that I want to push a pit today, I want to get this as high as I could. So we are slotting that with the Ruby because we need to survive deep in the pits, and Harlequin Crest is amazing. The damage reduction, +4 to all ranks. It far outweighs Godslayer Crown. If I didn't have Harlequin Crest, the other item I might use would be something like a legendary aspect with concussive strikes on it. This way I could daze enemies and also do multiplicative damage. But Harlequin Crest just beats every other helmet in this game, so that's why we're going to go with that for this slot. Looking at the chest piece, we have Snow Veiled. Snow Veiled gives us unstoppable whenever we cast ice armor, and we want to be casting this all the time. We do become unstoppable for about 4.9 seconds, and that's important, and you'll see in just a minute why that is. In addition, when you're using this armor, you're looking for things like intelligence, maximum life, and armor, so that you can achieve armor cap all the time. I did masterwork this. As you can see, it's 4 to 12. I hit total armor, and that's okay. I think ultimately I would rather have life or int because I'd rather be doing more damage and not get one shot against certain mechanics in the game, especially at deep pit content. Looking at the gloves, you're looking for gloves of accelerating aspect that have attack speed, critical strike chance, and some amount of ranks to Frozen Orb. For me, it's very important that you get gloves that have a GA. You hear that a lot, GA. That's that star, that greater affix. It's important that you find this because if you can triple hit on ranks 4, 8, and 12 on Frozen Orb, you could actually have +8 ranks to that. And that's a lot of damage that I'm missing. It's a lot of difference you're going to feel when you're hitting targets with or without those 3 ranks. So it's important that you get attack speed, and we'll discuss why that is in just a moment. And critical strike chance is also important for this build to really deal those massive, massive chunks to anything in your way. Finally, you'll see that we're doing cold damage and a chance to stun for 2 seconds. It could be chance to stun, freeze, it doesn't matter. You're just trying to apply some sort of stagger or some sort of stop to the things that are trying to hit you, so if they just can't do it, you lock them down. And while they're under some sort of crowd control, you deal multiplicative damage to things that are stunned or frozen at 20%. So that's really important. Really, really good. Now, why are we doing cold? Well, cold we're going to find out later on in the video when we get to the Paragon board. Cold actually aids the amount of damage that our conjurations do. I originally told you in the previous video that damage to close was what I wanted to do because we are typically positioned close to monsters. However, you want to do as much damage as you can, and cold may be bugged at the moment. I'm not sure. I'm waiting on that. There's some data testing going on to support that theory, but for now, go for cold because absolutely it's still good damage, and it does help your conjurations. If you want to try something different to really push your +% damage, try it up close and see how that feels for you. Let's look at the pants here. This is why Unstoppable matters. Tibalt's Will. It's the go-to. It's the pants in the game that give us multiplicative damage while we're unstoppable, which is what the Snow Veiled aspect does every time we press one of 2 things. We become unstoppable whenever we teleport. We also become unstoppable every time we use ice armor, thanks to the Snow Veiled aspect on our chest through Tibalt's Will. And so the things that we're trying to hit here, damage is always nice, but you're trying to get 12 out of 12 masterworking, in my opinion, on damage reduction from close enemies at the perfect roll of 20%. And again, you're slotting rubies in here because you need to survive anything deep in the pit, and they hurt, and they really hit hard, man. So what are you looking for? Damage reduction from close as much as you can. I've actually hit this twice. As you can tell, the masterwork is 8 out of 12, but that's because we're trying to push a pit today. So I took a little bit of damage and damage reduction from close, but finally, try to get damage reduction from close as much as you can. Looking at the boots, we're going with Esu's Heirloom here, and they've been actually performing quite nice for me. So Esu's are interesting. Whenever you evade, you get 125% movement speed for 3 seconds. And listen to why that's important. You're also going to get rolls on this, such as critical strike damage, or you can masterwork movement speed as well. But your critical strike chance is increased by 30% of your movement speed bonus. So for me at the moment, it's 6.1%. But listen in because we're going to discuss why that number actually, current bonus, goes up quite a bit thanks to Esu's Heirloom. I will tell you, a bit of a spoiler alert, our chance to crit at the moment is about 77.5%, which is pretty much always, but it's not 100. So we're going to keep pushing for that. Looking at my weapon, we are slotting this with vulnerable. By the way, vulnerable damage is Sapphire. Anytime something's vulnerable, we're going to do 20% more damage to it. And that's the same in the offhand, by the way. It's better than the Emerald, in my opinion, because we can't always crit just yet. So for now, we're going to go with vulnerable damage. Let's go over the wand. I think you want something that has at least 1 GA on intelligence, which is good. You want damage and critical strike damage because you do crit. Whenever you do crit, you want that big hit. But I would appreciate, and I think you would too, if you could actually get a triple masterwork on chance for frozen orb projectiles to cast twice. That is a lot of damage for this character to deal. And as you're going to see here, I'm just going to shoot a couple times, right? I get one, right? And sometimes you get that double shot. It's hard to reproduce that amount of damage in Diablo 4 if you're not actually just casting those extra frozen orbs. And in addition, it's the way the build works. You want to be casting frozen orbs to cast conjurations, so those conjurations through the lucky hit could also proc more frozen orbs, and that's where all the damage, that bursty damage, comes from. It makes this build so much fun to play. And some people are asking, hey, why are you using a wand instead of a dagger? That's because the wand actually has the implicit lucky hit chance. Now let's go to the next item really quick to show you why that's significant, okay? Oh, by the way, Frozen Orbit is very important for this. You want this Frozen Orbit aspect. Frozen Orb explodes for 2 additional times at its destination. And remember, that destination is wherever your mouse is. So if I click there, that's where it explodes. If I click here, that's where it explodes. So you control the destination, and watch out pulses. 1, 2. You see? Amazing. Must have, must have, must have. No doubt about it. Looking at the amulet, Fractured Winter Glass, this is the, again, like I said before, piece de la resistance. This is the thing that makes the build tick. And Masterwork 12 out of 12, boys, I was very, very lucky. I actually Masterworked this all 3 times on Conjuration Mastery, and is a 1% off perfect inside the actual legendary effect. So walking through this, it gives you vulnerable damage, gives you non-physical damage, which is basically everything that we deal. It does give you cooldown reduction as well. And then Conjuration Mastery ranks, and listen in to find out why that's extremely important for this build. Why sometimes you might watch other people on Twitch or wherever you watch streams, you're going to find out that, hey, that guy's mana is not going away. There's a reason for that, and it's Conjuration Mastery, and I'm going to discuss with you why that is, okay? The next ring that we're going to look into is the Ring of the Starless Skies. Again, it's Uber. So if you can get an Uber Starless Skies, in my opinion, you'd like to get Critical Strike Chance, because as we previously discussed, you want to get a 100% chance to crit so that you can actually appreciate the damage on your weapons when you're getting that Critical Strike damage benefit, okay? So Starless Skies, amazing. Go for Crit Strike Chance when you can. And I do like Starless Skies. A build like this is very hungry. It wants to be using resource all the time. And so Starless Skies was like built for this simply because spending your primary resource by casting Frozen Orb reduces the cost of your Frozen Orb and increases your damage by 40x multi. Okay? Amazing, amazing, amazing. And now, just again, make sure you stick around through the video because I'm going to give you items that you could supplement or replace with this in case you don't have these Uber Uniques. I'm not going to leave you out in the dust. You don't have to have everything to make it work, but you're going to need this gear to get deep into the pits and clear a T100 like I did, because it is very, very taxing and tricky to do, especially for the Sork at the moment, at the time of this video, week 2. Finally, Talrash's Iridescent Loop. Talrash's is also pretty solid. For each elemental type of damage you deal, you gain 15% multiplicative damage, and that caps out at 60%. So where do you get that extra 15%, right? Like if you're thinking about it, you'll see on our bar here, we got Ice Blades, we've got Unstable Currents, we got Frozen Orb, we got like Flame Shield. Okay, so if you just looked at the bar, I get lightning whenever I stomp down a teleport, I do lightning damage. My Ice Blades are going to come out and do frost damage, and then fire. I could walk through something with my shield. Well, that's true, but as we cast Frozen Orbs, we might actually produce something called Hydra. One of our Hydra conjurations, right? So see, we got Lightning Spears coming out, trying to stun everything. We got Ice Blades coming in, reducing the cooldown of things. And sometimes we'll get that Hydra that comes in. So that's fire, lightning, and cold. That's 45% multiplicative. And if you want that extra 15, you can get it in our final item here, your offhand, okay? So the offhand has an opportunity to do one of 2 things for you. And I'm going to kind of like focus you here for a second. You have a chance to fire more Frozen Orbs, or you have a chance to actually apply another type of damage, which could be like poison to access that other 15% multiplicative. Now, in my opinion, the way I'm playing this now, I do not want to go that way. I'm willing to give up 15% multiplicative damage to get 2 more Frozen Orbs, okay? That's what I want. I want to masterwork on my offhand, chance for Frozen Orb projectiles to cast twice, and in clearing this T100, guys, I didn't even have that. I rolled a 147 int to 2 off perfect, and I had 2 greater affix rolls. One was resource cost reduction, which isn't even cooldown reduction, which I'd like to have, and I got critical strike chance again. I was trying to push, and so I decided to go with Storm Swell, because Storm Swell kind of just gives me 30% multiplicative damage to vulnerable targets, which is everything all the time, to enemies while I have a barrier. So that just made sense. Like I always have a barrier, and you'll see why in a second through the skill tree, and everything's always vulnerable because of the way the build plays through Ice Blades hitting, and you're going to see that tech in just a minute as well. So that's kind of like what all came together. But for you guys, intelligence, crit strike chance, and go for cooldown reduction on a greater affix, a GA CDR being cooldown reduction, in my opinion, will yield a lot of value to you. And again, just quickly, I'm going to just breeze over this so you can follow this part. My Shaco, my helmet was masterworked 8 out of 12, wasn't even perfect. My chest is 4 out of 12. My gloves are 8 out of 12. My Tibalt's 8 out of 12. My boots are 6 out of 12. My weapon's 11 out of 12. I'm discussing the masterwork rank so you know where the power level was in the gear. My Fractured Winter Glass was perfect, 12 out of 12. Ring of the Starless Skies, 8 out of 12. Tal Rosh is 8 out of 12. And my offhand, 10 out of 12 at the moment. So I mentioned that we were going to discuss a couple things with regards to how we're getting damage out here. Let me bring you over to the skill tree here. We're going to discuss some of the changes that I've made in this Uber variant first, okay? So we can't really change our two basic skills. We put 2 points here, one in Firebolt, one in Frostbolt. Then we move down into our core skills where we do max out Frozen Orb. And unlike other builds, we're not taking greater Frozen Orb here. We don't need to make sure that Frozen Orb's explosions have a 40% chance to make enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds, because actually our Ice Blades do that for us. And you'll see in the video footage here, things are consistently always vulnerable because Ice Blades are getting spawned so much that they're just doing that job for us. So what do? We get to make sure that we have Destructive Frozen Orb. The explosion restores 5 mana when hitting a frozen enemy. That also works on a staggered boss. So while you're clearing the content of any sort of quick run, or you have a staggered boss, that's also yielding a lot more mana, so you have consistent uptime with casting Frozen Orbs, conjurations are getting spawned from that, and away we go. I do put 1 point into Devastation, and I max out Elemental Dominance so that my Frozen Orbs deal more damage when they're cast above 50 mana, which is all the time. Moving down into our defensive tree, I only put 1 point into Flame Shield. We didn't put 2 points here. We saved that later on in Precision Magic. I do put 1 point to Teleport all the way into Shimmering Teleport, so I get 30% damage reduction. This has saved me many, many times, and I thought about going to Mystical Teleport just for some extra damage, but truthfully, I need the damage reduction deep into the pit because things just hit very, very hard after they've been frozen, after my Flame Shield wears off. You got to get here. Next, 3 points into Glass Cannon. I love Glass Cannon, but man, it hurts. It hurts a lot, but you can't give up 18% multiplicative. You just grab it up. Then I have 1 point to Ice Armor, 1 point to Enhanced Ice Armor, and unlike other builds I'm recommending in this Uber version, you take Mystical Ice Armor. So while it's active, I periodically chill close enemies for 20%, and then I deal 15% multiplicative increased damage to things that are frozen or staggered like a boss. It's how I get additional multiplicative damage. If you don't have the Uber version, you're probably still taking Shimmering Ice Armor. We'll talk about that when we get there in just a moment. Finally, down into the Conjuration skill tree, this is where we're going to burn things. So we put 1 point into Hydra, 1 point to Enhanced Hydra, 1 point to Summoned Hydra, because Hydra also burns the enemies for some amount of damage, which is very minor, doesn't matter, for 6 seconds. And that's important because the one thing that this build struggles on is single target. And struggles means like it doesn't get to deal a lot of lethal billions of damage like the other guys. We got to work for it out here. So this is the technology we're going to use to apply burning to our targets, okay? And then we have Precision Magic, which is increasing our lucky hit chance by 10%. And the reason you want lucky hit chance, just to quickly kind of remind you, we come over here to our character, the lucky hit chance is our conjurations having a chance, 70% luckily, if you've got it, to launch Frozen Orbs. So through the lucky hit percentage, and the way it's set up right now, you're going to have, I'm going to say roughly a 14% chance per Frozen Orb to actually lucky hit with Precision Magic slotted like that, okay? So 14% per orb, and away we go, more orbs come out. 1 point into Ice Blades, 1 point Enhanced Ice Blades, 1 point into Summoned Ice Blades, okay? Then we have 1 point in Lightning Spear, 1 point Enhanced Lightning Spear, 1 point into Invoked Lightning Spear. So why are we taking these points? Well, the thing is, even though Lightning Spear is not on our skill board, you see right here, it's not here. We have Unstable Currents instead. We still get to appreciate that benefit when we conjure it up from casting a Frozen Orb, okay? So your Frozen Orb may spawn a Lightning Spear, and when it does, that Lightning Spear stuns enemies when it critically strikes, which again is about 77.5% and maybe a little bit higher depending on how we get to push this gear. Now, you're also going to put 1 point to Align the Elements, 3 points into Mana Shield. It's important to me that you have max damage reduction as possible after you spend 100 mana. So if you break it down, the way the build is so far, Frozen Orb costs 32 mana. So every fourth Frozen Orb is going to get in there and give us that damage reduction. So 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And away we go. We have that damage reduction enabled, and we're looking good, okay? Fantastic. Now, 1 point into Protection. We just want to get that barrier up all the time. And barrier is easy to come by. Every time we use a cooldown, Protection gives us 10% of our max life as barrier. So we give up a little bit of defense there. That's A-okay. You'll see why in a minute. And then here comes the big one. Conjuration Mastery. This can become 8 out of 3. So for every single Conjuration I spawn, I've got at the moment, because there's 7 ranks in it, 7% multiplicative damage, 7% movement speed, and 14% mana regeneration for each Conjuration like it says. So the idea here is that we're kind of floating around the number 10. It used to be 30 in the PTR, but because we can no longer get, well, a couple things are happening, but we can't get attack speed on our weapons anymore. It's not a roll you can get. In the PTR you could. We can't spawn as many. So what's actually happening here is if you look at our character sheet, I'm going to go to Critical Strike Chance. I want you to watch this number for a second, okay? So I spawn Conjurations, right? Where's that Critical Strike? You see how it's kind of going up now? 77.5? That's because I have Conjurations up. So the more Conjurations that I have, and that's only 3, the more that number goes up to a cap of 100%. 100% crit when we get there, okay? So Conjuration Mastery does a lot of things. It gives us continuous single target mana regeneration at that rank. It gives us a lot of value, about 70% multiplicative damage, because we get about 10 on average with this attack speed that we have, okay? Conjuration Mastery, in my opinion, one of the best nodes in Diablo 4, and the Sorc should be abusing that as much as possible, and this build certainly tries, okay? Moving down into our Mastery skill tree, we have 1 point in Inner Flames, and then we have 3 points into Devouring Blaze, because we do want to deal increased critical strike damage against burning enemies. If they're crowd controlled, it's 30% multi. And they always crowd controlled unless they're a boss, which means they have to be staggered. So again, how does this guy burn them? Well, you could walk through him with a flame shield, or just wait till a Hydra gets spawned, because a Hydra gets spawned a lot of the time. So things are getting burned, okay? So things are getting burned. And again, in just a minute, we're going to discuss why burning matters, but it's going to allow us to take less damage from enemies. It's going to allow us to do more damage. Burning is very important. We don't want to give that up. Moving down into our ultimate skill tree here, 3 points into Permafrost, you can put 3 points into Hoarfrost, and 3 points into Icy Touch. And then 1 point goes into Unstable Currents. And the reason we're using Unstable Currents is because we want the 25% increased attack speed. And while we have attack speed, it's important to tell you guys, and finally, we'll just talk about it, Veer's Mastery, there's something to discuss there, so don't skip that, you're going to want to know. Unstable Currents is amazing because it gives us this attack speed. The attack speed that we get for casting is great and all, but whenever we have conjurations and stuff, right, our attack speed is also increased and allows them to attack faster. So you kind of press the button and away you go, right? And so the higher the attack speed you have, the more your conjurations attack, and with your lucky hit, the higher the increased odds are that they're actually going to conjure frozen orbs. So that's why it's on our bar. Unstable Currents might feel like it has a long cooldown, but with the amount of Ice Blades you're spawning, you're going to have a pretty decent uptime on Unstable Currents. Like, a lot of times there's going to be a stagger window where you can actually pop Unstable Currents and really dig into the boss's HP to do some meaningful damage. But the kind of gameplay here, you're going to want to learn this part. The way you want to play this, if in the perfect situation, is you're casting Frozen Orb. Let's assume for a second that this thing's not twirling around like it lost its fucking mind. You're casting stuff, you're having a good time, right? And then bang, you stagger the boss. You're going to dash, because dash increases through Esus. It increases your critical strike opportunity, right? Because your movement speed just went up by a lot. So you dash like this. You're casting, dash, Unstable Currents, bang. And you just start full sending on that boss. Okay? And that's where you're going to get the most damage. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Finally, Veer's Mastery. Close enemies take 15% increased damage from your skills. Ignore the shock skills part. It's all damage, and deal 20% less damage to you. Critical strikes increase these bonuses to 25% respectively for 3 seconds. Okay? So we're going to deal 25% multiplicative damage, and we take 20% less. It's just the call. It's what you want to do. Now, the Paragon board, let's discuss this, because I mentioned you're going to want to know why burn damage matters, and this is it. So our first starting board, we're going to be using Tactician Glyph. Tactician's awesome because it allows these nodes to give us additional non-physical damage and resistances, which we are capped on, by the way. And the next board we're going to go into is the Burning Instinct board, where the glyph we're using is Destruction. We deal 194% increased critical strike damage, and then we also deal multiplicative damage. But inside this Burning Instinct board, you're going to see that we have damage reduction for burning enemies. We deal additional damage to burning enemies, which is why it's worth it to invest those points in the Hydra, because without those points, we have to go to our enchantment slot, and we can't use Ice Blades like we want to get that cooldown, and we can't use Frozen Orb. We have to give up one of these two. Well, you're not going to give up Frozen Orb, because whenever you cast a non-basic skill, which is everything that you do, you got a 30% chance to launch an orb, which is amazing. And we're not going to give up Ice Blades because the cooldown's amazing, because it also brings up our big damage burst window, right, with Unstable Currents, as well as our defensive layers and our Ice Armor and Flame Shield. So to get the tech of big damage, you got to invest in Hydra burn damage and get out of Firebolt. I was stuck on Firebolt for a long time, and after I moved away, the build was a little bit slower, but the quality of life was definitely there in the damage, okay? So board 1, Tactician. Board 2, you're going to have Destruction with all the correct, like Cinders node and Smoldering Embers node. The next board you're moving into is the Enchantment Master board, where the glyph you're going to use is Elementalist. Gives you 15% multiplicative damage. The following board after that is going to be your Frigid Fate board, which tells you your damage, you deal bonus damage to vulnerable enemies equal to basically 30% of the total amount bonus to cold, okay? So it's 30, because we have cold on all of our gear, gloves, you name it, it's everywhere. The glyph here is going to be Flame Feeder. We deal additional damage to burning enemies, and we deal 10% multiplicative damage direct to those enemies that are burning. We're also grabbing weakness for vulnerable damage and cold resistance and chilling, basically just to grab these two magical nodes, okay? Then we move down to the next board, which is going to be Elemental Summoner. Your conjuration skills have a 10% reduced cooldown or mana cost. They also deal bonus damage equal to the amount of bonus damage to cold, fire, and lightning, okay? So that's 51%. which is why we're putting it on our gear instead of damage to close. It's because of the elemental summoner node. The glyph in this board is going to be reinforced to reduce the damage that we take because deep pits deal good damage. You're also going to move up over here to grab the Keeper of the Elements to give you additional non-physical damage, which is fire, lightning, and cold. And the next board from here is going to be Ceaseless Conduit, where the glyph you're going to socket in is Territorial. Again, you gain 15% damage reduction against close because we are consistently close, and we deal more damage to close. The next board that we move into is going to be the Searing Heat board, where the glyph that we choose is going to be Control. We're going to deal 95% damage to crowd-controlled enemies, and then this is where we get that multiplicative damage if they're stunned or frozen, which is why you want stunned or frozen on your gear. And by the way, it doesn't matter if you choose stunned or frozen on your rolls. It's the exact same ceiling of percent that it could hit. And then finally, we're going to end up grabbing the Icefall board, and we're going to grab Icefall, the node, okay? So grab Icefall, your frost skills deal multiplicative damage to vulnerable enemies, and this bonus is doubled to 30% when they're frozen, so 30% multiplicative. And that is your Paragon, that is your skill tree, and that is the gear, and that is also your enchantment system for the character that got cleared at T100, okay? Now, the next part, what happens if you don't have all this gear? Well, let's check that out over here. Okay, so I'm going to have a link for you, and in the description of the video, you're going to see the Uber's endgame and the non-Uber's version. So one of the big things that I'm trying to solve for a lot of people, if you want to get in this really fun board, a really fun build, I should say, excuse me, is mana is a problem. Mana is a big problem. So to solve that, there's some changes that we make in the build. The first thing is I want you guys to take Concussive Strikes in the helmet if you can get it, and go for cooldown reduction. If you can get a Greater Affix or a GA on CDR, feel free to take that. On your chest for the non-Uber version, you're going to be looking for something like this. Again, Snow Veiled, still very good because you do want to get unstoppable. It helps you to move around. And try to get that max life roll if you can. Just helps you survive. You're going to be armor capped anyway. You'll see here that we grab armor and life. And I believe our armor over here, let's see in the defense, armor is 12,000. You're way over cap. You're fine. You're good to go. As for the gloves, accelerating still the move. You're still aiming to get that Greater Affix roll and Frozen Orb. And you're going to try to masterwork that 3 times. And that'll last you to the end of the game. As for the pants, Ever Living is also very safe. You take 25% less damage from crowd-controlled enemies or vulnerable enemies. That's both. You're always going to have an enemy affected by this at any point. For the boots, Ghostwalker cleats. I like Ghostwalker again. Makes you unstoppable for 4 seconds after. You get increased movement speed, and you can freely move through enemies, which is one of the most impressive feelings in the game, where you just can't be stopped or held back. You're going to look for intelligence on your boots, by the way. Wand, okay? Again, same deal. You're looking for intelligence, vulnerable damage, and damage. And I want you to masterwork on chance to double cast Frozen Orb if possible, please. And again, Frozen Orbit. For the neck, gotta have it. You can't play this build without it. You need a Fractured Winter Glass. And again, if you can hit that Conjuration Mastery, cool. I'm not recommending in the non-Uber version that you go for the GA. All I need you to do is have like a rank 2 because that's how it rolls. The range is 1 to 2. And if you could actually hit that with 1 Masterwork, it goes to 3. And then finally, if you hit them all, you go to 4. But I'm not even going to ask you to do that. Just try to hit that 1, okay? And you'll appreciate that huge benefit through the mana regeneration that you got. For your rings, this is the big change for folks, okay? I'd like you to get this if you can. Try to go to Prodigy. So Prodigy is amazing. Whenever you use a cooldown in this build, you're going to get 25 mana back, okay? And I want you to try to Greater Affix Critical Strike so you crit a lot. And so the idea here is on a single target, Prodigy is going to help you keep that mana up that's always going away. And then whenever you're clearing the content, you're going to have the Ring of the Umbral aspect. Umbral's great. Again, you're going for the Critical Strike, Greater Affix, and you're going to try to masterwork that if you can. But Umbral's really, really good because you're going to restore resource or mana whenever you crowd control an enemy. So you try to crowd control them with your Ice Blades. You try to crowd control them with your Frozen Orbs. All that jazz is coming out all the time. But in your build, it's a little bit different in the skill tree. So stick around for a second. You're going to find out why that is. And then finally, you're going to go for the Storm Swell on your offhand. Exact same as the Uber version. But you'll notice some subtle changes already. In your skill selection here, you're going to see I'm going for Ice Blades and I'm going for Lightning Spear. I'm not giving you Unstable Currents because that is very tough to maintain and sustain mana in a build where you don't have all those uber uniques like Starless Skies and Shaco, Harlequin Crest kind of giving you the benefit of quick damage to kill or reduced cost on your skills. So conjure up some stuff, stun them up, get your cooldowns down. You're going to level just fine. In your enchantment slot, Firebolt is going to make everything burn, which is fantastic, and also Frozen Orb. Let's check out the skill tree for the non-Uber version to see what is actually changing so you can have a nice time. Again, first and foremost, you're going to see here, instead of this Destructive Orb, you could take Greater Frozen Orb if you want to. I still don't think you need it. I think you're going to be able to cast just fine. So stick with Destructive Orb, okay? Moving down, nothing really changes over here. It's all still the same. You're still going to burn over here with your Summoned Hydra. That's fine. You're still going to put cooldown on your Ice Blades. That all makes sense. Nothing changed. And you're going to have that stun ability from Lightning Spear. That's cool too. moving down into your mastery, excuse me, you're still going to burn stuff. That all makes sense. But the good stuff is right here in your ultimate skill tree. I'm putting points into Frigid Breeze so that every frozen orb that you deal damage to against a vulnerable enemy is actually going to start to regenerate your mana. So this is going to help you feel like that fluid quality of life that you want out of your build when you don't have all the uber uniques. And then also, you're going to have Fiery Surge. So killing a burning enemy increases your mana regeneration by 30%. So how do you make them burn? Hydra, but because you're not casting as fast, I'm going to back it up with Firebolt enchant for you. Again, you're not going to be pushing pits with this, but you can easily clear content with this stuff. Like regular bosses, not non-tormented bosses. Echo of Lilith's going to be a pain. I wouldn't even recommend it until you get very, very good gear because she is just a stalwart son of a bitch. And finally, Veer's Mastery, same thing. Good crit multi, good damage reduction. The Paragon board is actually the exact same, so you can level up those glyphs for the end game with a little bit of confidence, just so you're aware. And so this is the non-Uber version, and both of these will be available in the description. If you're not sure to get to these on the Max Roll site that we're using here, you just click on No Ubers, and you click on Uber's Endgame. And it'll adjust all the items for you, adjust everything, the skill tree, so you can follow it along easily. I sincerely hope you guys also have a chance to get in here and play this build. It's been so, so good. There was one thing that I don't believe that we touched on with the Ice Blades. It's very, very important that you know this because I think I might have skipped over it. And this is it. This is the last one. So Ice Blades, right? Conjure a pair of Ice Blades for 6 seconds and rapidly slash. And they also have a 40% chance to make enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. So what you're going to see in the gameplay, everything's vulnerable all the time. And when everything's vulnerable, you don't have to get vulnerability from your frozen orb. You can actually get that mana back. So you can cast even more all the time. I sincerely can't wait to hear in the comments you guys are clearing your Pit 100 as well. I'm very happy to have done it, and I hope this video was thorough, robust, and gave you guys some options to dig into the build and give you some confidence to get that T100 achievement for yourself. I want to say thank you for checking out the video. You guys made it this far. Thanks for the YouTube crowd for getting me to 10,000 subscribers. I can't believe we're there already. It's much love from me to you. And get out there and cast those frozen orbs, guys. I'll see you on the next one.